One, two. Right. Hello, everyone. Can I grab your attention? And we will start. It's gone 7 o'clock. Seems to be an echo. Yeah, please. Is that coming back from through the laptop there? Hello. So we've got an echo. Okay, right. Okay, welcome to the Planning Committee on Wednesday, the 20th of October, 2021. We have 6 items on the agenda this evening. We've got a full agenda, so I'm going to try and move us on as quickly as possible this evening. For anyone here and online, the committee are in front of me, officers are to the right, members that are not on the committee are sitting there, and members of the public are beyond, and speakers are just in between. So just for clarity to anyone that isn't aware of what the process is here. Okay, without further ado, I'll move on. So apologies for absence and substitutions. So we've had one substitution, Councillor Nand, Councillor Summers. Oh, sorry, 2 substitutions. Councillor Young for Councillor Sumner. Got to get my Sumners and Summers right. Okay. And
sorry, Chair, we've also got apologies from Councillor Ball with Councillor Busuttil as his.
Oh, sorry, yes, yeah, another one. So 3 substitutions. And Councillor Ahmed is not able to make it this evening. Okay, any urgent matters? I am not aware of any urgent matters. Nope, no one's telling me about any urgent matters. Any declarations of interest?
Can I just state that I had a briefing as a ward councillor on International House during the lockdown. It's not a prejudicial interest, it's just making it for the purposes of transparency.
Thank you, Councillor Young.
Chair, yeah, just to declare an interest on item 10, the company that I work for, BCG, have advised the applicants. I've had no part in any of that, but I will recuse myself from the meeting for that item and take no part in it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Martin.
So as the ward councillor, I've also had previous discussions with the White Hart developers, and I'm also aware of the Northolt Grange proposal.
Okay, did you catch that? Okay, no others? No, right, I'll move on. Matters to be considered in private, I'm not aware of anyway. I don't think there are. It's very unusual. Okay, I'll move on. Minutes of the last meeting. Was it a correct record of the meeting of the 14th of September 2021? For those that were here.
Agreed.
Thank you. So site visit attendance. I don't have it in front of me. I'm going to try and recall by names. Do we have the site visit attendance, Katie? Right. Do you have it? Alex, do you have it? Yeah, okay. Well, let's do it by roll call. It's easier, then we can record it. So, okay, Councillor, well, I was on the site visits. Councillor Mahmood was, who's nodding. Councillor Ahmed wasn't. Councillor Praveen Anand was. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Councillor Bustill was. Councillor Bell was. Councillor Brett, unfortunately, had a personal, not disaster. No, that's not true. No, family issue. Councillor Conn was there. Councillor Conti was there. Councillor Dadwell couldn't make it and indicated beforehand. Councillor Martin was there. Councillor Sahuta was there. Councillor Land, I've mentioned already, and Councillor Young instead of Councillor Sumner was there. That's correct. Anyone objecting to that? No? Right. Let's move on to the agenda for tonight. Let me tell you how we're going to run the agenda tonight. I'm going to run the agenda with, as it stands at the moment, with the Green, Southwark first, then I'm going to go to Pitsanger Lane second, Orion Park third, bring back the White Hart as fourth, and then run the agenda International House, Northolt Grange from there. Does that make sense? Because I'm running because of the speakers list. That's why I've changed it. Okay, so without further ado, we have an officer online to present the first Green Southall, the first item on the agenda this evening. Greg, are you there?
Yes, I am, Chair. Thank you. And thank you to yourself and the members for facilitating my presentation in this form. My colleague, Sever, is going to run the slides for me. And I see he's got that up now. Is that on the screen, Chair?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, then I'll begin. So this is a site rear of the Green in Southall. Our members attended a site visit on Saturday, as you say, Chair. So there won't be necessity for me to go into any great depth with regard to the description. Second slide, please, Sever, which is an aerial view of the site, an unusual shape, mostly due to the fact that it has a numerous pedestrian or vehicular access points to the Green or Featherstone Road, as indicated. Members were able also to see the public car park. Next screen, please, Sever. This is a screen that's not in the report, Chair, but I've had it produced by the applicants, and it gives a broad indication of the principal land uses on the site. The public car park, Featherstone Road Public Car Park. The items, the areas marked in orange are the two banqueting facilities, the Monsoon Palace and the Monsoon Banqueting and Milan Palace. The areas in green being the Dillyway Yard industrial units, in pink some a wholesale warehouse, and then in the bottom left-hand corner on Featherstone Terrace, community facilities, mainly the Somali Resource Centre. Next screen, please, Sever. So these are photographs of the site, and if you can flick through them, please, Sever, because I'm sure members have had a chance to have a look at them, and if they haven't, we can return to them later in questions. And if you go to the next slide, please, Sever, pause there a minute. So the principal heritage assets in relation to the site, I pause here, Chair, to mention the one in the bottom right-hand corner, which is the electricity substation standing at the corner of Dillaway Yard and next to St Anselm's Church, which is the building that's proposed to be demolished as part of the application. The other buildings to the left of the plan are statutory listed buildings, none of which are affected. Next slide, please, Sever. This confirms the local plan allocation for site SOU8. Next slide, please, Seva. And that, given that context, Chair, the relationship of the planning application site in the top left-hand corner in dark red to the rest of the allocation, indicating how this is the first stage in the delivery of the wider allocation, and as a consequence of which the site has the shape that it does and contains a number of the facilities that it does, as in effect a pump priming exercise to help bring forward the rest of the allocation in due course. Next slide, please. So there's been very extensive community consultation between the developer, Peabody, and the local authority and a range of stakeholders over the past 2+ years, which is all set out in the report, Chair. And then just noting at the bottom of that page, Chair, the ongoing engagement by Avison Young, appointed by the council to negotiate with landowners with regard to potential land acquisition. I can clarify that later if you want. And that negotiation is ongoing as of this week and recently, Chair. Next slide, please. This is also a slide that appears in the report and sets out the design development, setting out how the scheme's been formulated, and in particular on the right-hand side, correlating the scheme to the Heathrow flight path, which will and always constitute a constraint on height with regards to development and its distribution. Next slide, please, Seva. And this takes us to the application scheme, Chair. Principally 3 blocks, A, B, and C, centred around the car park, that's block A, around the area of the 2 banqueting facilities and the warehouse facility, block B, and then block C, essentially in the area of Dillaway Yard. And then within that, distributed within the site, if we go to the next drawing, please, Seva, a phasing plan, which shows how the applicant intends to bring forward the phases of development, and in particular noting that in phase A, which is the area in green, the intention is also to bring forward a component of the public replacement car parking in Featherstone Terrace, which is the sort of leg on the bottom left-hand side of that drawing. The balance of the public car parking will come forward in phase 3, which is on the north side of the site. It's on the right-hand side of that plan, the orange area, giving the total complement of 90 parking spaces, public car parking spaces. And then moving on to the next drawing, Chair. This is an illustration showing how those areas are distributed, having done the scene setting for you. And then the secure residential parking areas for the blocks are contained, as you can see on the left-hand side, in the ochre colour for block A within the centre of the block at ground floor level, and then likewise for block B on the right-hand side. And then the various blocks are separated by a seam of public realm, the green areas that run through the site, and the red squares are just activity areas, Chair. They're not intended to indicate any built development or otherwise. Next slide, please, Seva. This shows the servicing and access arrangements, Chair. As I was explaining, we're utilising existing access points on the north side. If I deal with that first, the current access to Dillaway Yard, which will be widened to make it 2-way, rather than necessitating the demolition of the old substation building, then providing access to the brown area, which is part of the public car parking, and then servicing and access to blocks B and C. And then just below that on the south side, Chair, is an area in blue, which is the current service access to the rear of shop and other premises on the green, and also gives access to the stub station, the switching station, which is in the centre at the back of that area, and does not form part of the planning application site. And then the utilisation of the existing service access and routeway to Dominion Centre as part of the main pedestrian thread through the site from the green and then up to the north, and then going to the left of that plan, the loop of Dominion Road and Featherstone Terrace, both of which remain 2-way, and then the access route through Block A, which is a service access that will serve both the commercial units and resident parking, and then exiting from the north side and then out via Featherstone Terrace. Thanks, Seva. Next slide, please. This is the illustration, Chair, for the area of crossing, the informal crossing area that was something that was always conceived and was interested the DRP when they looked at it. They were looking for something a little bit more substantial in size, but having assessed the number of speed tables and other highway works already in the highway, the option has been looked at, in fact, to use some an artwork feature, which is shown in the north on the top left-hand side of the screen there, Chair. And the applicant proposes that there should be a competition or community-based design to come forward with the layout of that. So there are no raised tables, no roadworks as such, as it would be a piece of artwork within there that physically links the site through to Southall Manor and the Manor grounds, which is a key part of the route through to public spaces. Next slide gives some detail on the public realm drawings and also the podium amenity spaces. It also summarises the open space and amenity space provision within the scheme, which is in the report, Chair. We can come back and clarify that if we need, but in essence, the position is that the private amenity balances far exceed the standards, but the other provisions, communal open space, public open space, play space, etc., are substandard and will necessitate contributions, to which our leisure department has made requests, and the areas to which they will be directed are included in the recommendation before you, Chair. Moving on to the next plan, and this shows the, please, Seva, the next slide. Thank you. Which shows the landscaping in the scheme, the dots essentially setting out the very extensive new tree planting, over 200 new trees as part of the development overall, both within the amenity spaces and in the public areas around the development. So a very significant greening, both of the development, its perimeter, its peripheries, as it relates to neighbouring development and properties, and through the site generally. So there's a net and very substantial increase in environmental greening from the way the site currently is, which will obviously bring wider benefits to the area as a result. And then the next slide, please, Seva, moving on to some images. This is a comparative block heights drawing, which is in the report, Chair, but it gives the sense of how the family of blocks are conceived within the scheme and the various relationship with the various access points. And you can see, for example, the lower block to the right-hand side behind the Tudor Rose, which is also part of a route through. The green area you see is one of the podium open spaces, and then about the centre middle of the plan, of the image rather, the public thoroughfare from the green through into the site and how that links through. And then next, please, Seva. Some images of the developments, most of which are in the report, Chair, but we can come back to them if we need to, but in essence giving us that sense of how the new family of blocks would relate to each other in key views. The top left, obviously, from Manor House grounds, from the top right from Dominion Road, bottom left at the crossing point of the Manor House grounds into the site. Those shop premises on the right-hand side are existing buildings. And on the bottom right, the relationship to, on the left-hand side, the Tudor Rose, and on the right-hand side, the St Anselm's Church on Dillaway Yard. Next image, please, Seva. And these are various views within the central public realm of the site, showing the space and openness between the buildings and also the varying materials around the family of blocks to give them that individual character. And the next slide, please, Seva. The top left-hand view is a view back towards the green, and in fact you can see in the middle distance behind the red leaf tree the Manor House, to give you the context. On the right-hand side, the whited out image is the Dominion Centre, and in the bottom right-hand side an area of the site which lies to the northwest side, where Block A adjoins the existing industrial units on the left-hand side there. And I should point out the industrial units within the area, like the Sutawala and Sons buildings, are mainly involved in the food-based or food delivery industries, and so they do some processing, manufacturing. We're not talking about heavy industrial uses or contaminants. This is part of the circular route through the shared surface, which shows that there's a good openness and space, and in due course that area would be absorbed when adjacent units come forward to create a new street and thoroughfare. And that's an important context for the consideration, Chair, is the relationship of the site to its wider context going forward. Next slide, please, Seva. which summarises the text in the report in terms of the arrangements of flats and their aspect and orientation, Chair, and then some key facts about the units: 3/4, 76% are dual aspect. The remainder, 24%, are single aspect but face only east or west. There are no north facing units. We have 57 flats that are wheelchair accessible, all situated at the lower levels of the blocks. They relate, certainly in relation to A and B, to the areas of communal space, and provide that added amenity quality to them. And then all accessible flats have a balcony, a space of between 6.4 and 8.2 square metres. And I mentioned this, Chair, which is well in excess of the GLA standard, because the DRP was very concerned that for accessible and wheelchair accessible flats, there should be an upping in the quality of private amenity space, and the applicant has delivered that, Chair. So the next screen, this is also a summary of tables and plans that appear in the report, Chair, and it gives you the layout and distribution of the various tenures within the scheme. I think it's self-explanatory, and also in the table on the right-hand side, how the scheme would make early delivery in phase 1, which is essentially block A, affordable housing, with the London affordable rent being a key component of the early delivery, which means that we would get an early contribution, early delivery of affordable housing to benefit of borough residents. This rather, so let's say, next slide, please, Seva. This is a table that appears in the report, Chair. It's a bit dense, so I won't take you through it, but we can go into it if we need to later, just to clarify the relationships of the dwelling mix. The next table, please, Seva. This is a slide that doesn't appear in the report, Chair, and what it does is it gives information on proposed rental levels for the London affordable rent units, and the headline points, the percentages on the right-hand side of that table, showing demonstrably, Chair, that for each of the dwelling types in those, they are all below, and certainly well below, the 60% threshold compared to existing rents in the area. So this is directed to a genuinely affordable model, as indeed we would expect the applicant Peabody to be directing themselves. The next slide, please, Seva. Gives us the layout of the commercial space within the scheme in light blue, and then the areas available within each of the units. And I will just pick out in block C on the north side of the site, Chair, that is the area where the child day nursery and the community space will be situated at the ground floor level. So although it's included within that overall provision, those are dedicated areas for those uses, Chair. Next slide, please, Seva. And then this gives separation distances, which is also in the report, Chair, and you can see that quite clearly in relation to neighbouring properties, off-site properties, the separation distances are more than in excess of our normal standards: 30 metres to the green, 22 metres to the rectory, or is it presbytery, behind St Anselm's. And then the only places where there is less than our normal guideline of 18 metres is within the family of blocks in block A, but those relationships, the windows that are opposite each other there, are secondary windows, so they're not causing a direct overlooking issue. Next slide, please, Seva. Thank you. This is a point that's picked up by the DRP, again, about the extent of sunlight usage within the amenity areas within the development, and whether it's meaningful. The key point about the yellow areas, Chair, I need to point out is that they will receive more than 2 hours, an average of 2 hours sunlight per day, or daylight, should I say, in this country, which is in excess of the BRE standards. Next slide, please. And this also appears in the report, Chair, and it was responding to a point from the DRP about whether, having regard to shadow lines, those amenity areas within the development would correspond to and be most accessible during times when they would be most likely to be used, such as, for example, when children finish school or for sitting out or otherwise. And it handsomely demonstrates that they are more than adequately provided for, Chair. Next slide, please, Seva. This summarises the principal responses to the application, particularly from the local community Chair. So we have 123 responses as of this afternoon, 117 objections, 5 support and 1 neutral. I won't go through them, Chair, because they're in the report. The next slide, please, Seva. Discusses the public benefits of the development, which also appears in the report, Chair, so I shan't take you through them here. And then the briefing note, Chair, which members should have. If you go on to that one, please, Seva. Next slide. Thank you. Which includes the GLA stage 1 response, which I hope was sufficiently clear for members in that report as well. And can I also confirm, although it didn't arrive in time to be included in the briefing note, the Ministry of Defence, this is with regard to bird strike and building heights, has not raised any objections and are content with our bird management condition, Chair. So there are no objections arising from any of those matters listed there, Chair. And so ultimately we come to the last page in the presentation, Chair, which summarises the key points in favour of the development, how the public benefits are both clear, decisively outweigh the less substantial harm to heritage assets and to the loss of the locally listed substation, how the development applying the development plan as a whole, whilst non-compliant with Tall Buildings Policy D9, is outweighed by the other policy benefits of the development and its exemplary design standards and other policies in the London Plan, which the GLA have fairly accepted are part of the planning balance and don't presume against tall buildings in this case. And in particular, bearing in mind the fact that this site is in an identified opportunity area, it's an allocated site, Chair, and taking into account all the considerations and the planning balance, the recommendation is to grant, Chair. And can I just point out to members that as this is a joint planning application between Ealing Borough and Peabody, it will be necessary, should members choose to adopt the recommendation to grant, Chair, to refer the application not only to the Mayor but also to the Secretary of State for him to decide whether he wishes to call the application in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that comprehensive briefing. Okay, we have 2 speakers. We have Nick Sutton as an objector, and you have 3 minutes, and Katie will remind you with 30 seconds to go, and we will be quite strict with the timings, as we always are with all speakers. Okay.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Nick Sutton. I'm a planning consultant from Maven Plan. We've been asked to speak in objection to this application on behalf of 3 landowners, Mr. Marley, Mr. Butt and Mr. Ahanian, who jointly own approximately 1/3 of the application site, similar in size to the council's car park. Our clients have owned their land and operated businesses from the site for over 15 years. They've always had aspirations to develop their land, either in isolation or in accordance with a wider master plan, as evidenced by their pre-application submission in 2017. However, at the time they were told their proposal was piecemeal, premature and prejudicial, as the council were in the process of identifying a development partner to prepare a master plan to secure the site's comprehensive regeneration. Despite having a significant land holding, my clients were not formally asked to be considered as a development partner. Indeed, they were discouraged to do so on the grounds they didn't have a track record of bringing forward proposals of this scale. However, they were told they would be treated fairly and receive fair value for their land. Since that time, they've spent the last 4 years trying to ascertain from the applicant and their advisors what fair value is. The initial offers they received were extremely low, to the point of being offensive, and were well below market value, or indeed the price they paid for the land many years prior. Having expressed these frustrations, in May 2021, a meeting was held with various council officers and politicians, and it was agreed all efforts would be made to try and reach a fair valuation. It took until September of this year until a revised valuation was issued, supported by limited evidence, and it was still well below the valuation my clients considered reasonable. During and since that time, my clients have provided their own valuations, supported by evidence, but as we stand today, there is still a 3.5 million difference between the 2 valuations. The process has not therefore been fair or timely. As of Monday, my clients have provided the council with a valuation they would accept, but there has understandably been insufficient time for this to be considered before today's meeting. A deferral for 1 month would allow this process to be concluded. Turning to the issue of affordable housing, Peabody have offered to provide 50% affordable housing, but have done so without knowing how much they will have to pay for my client's land. Clearly, if they need to pay more than they are currently offering, their ability to deliver 50% affordable housing will be severely compromised. Indeed, it's our view that this 50% offer is simply a headline figure in order to secure permission, and it will be inevitably reduced as negotiations take place in respect of land values. Councillors should therefore place little or no weight on the amount of affordable housing being offered. In light of the above, we request the matter be deferred until the next committee for the following 2 reasons. 1, to see if agreement can be reached with respect to the existing values so the application can be reported back to committee with the support of the majority rather than the minority of landowners within the application site. And 2, for Peabody to confirm if they are still able to deliver 50% affordable housing based on the agreed land value.
Thank you. Thank you. That's 3 minutes. Thank you. Right, and for the applicant, Simon Barry, I believe is joining us virtually. Is that correct?
Yes, good, yeah, good evening, Chair and members. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through?
I can hear. Is that you, Simon?
Hopefully, yes, sorry. Good evening, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you. Oh, yes, you can.
Okay, yeah.
Right in the top corner.
I'm on camera somewhere, I think. So thank you. Shall I?
Simon, just let me remind you, you've got 3 minutes to speak, and we will tell you when you've got 30 seconds to go, and we will stop you at 3 minutes. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm pleased to be here today and to be working in partnership with Ealing Council to bring forward these exciting plans to regenerate this part of Southall. Before I talk about the benefits of our proposal, I wanted to take the opportunity to provide some background on who Peabody are. Created by social visionary George Peabody, we opened our first social housing estate in Spitalfields in 1864 in an attempt to tackle the poverty that followed the Industrial Revolution. The Peabody Group is now responsible for over 67,000 homes and 150,000 residents, including 16,000 care and support customers. We draw upon the 150 years of history and expertise to develop and build reliably good modern services, build and maintain the best quality developments, and work with local communities and build long-term partnerships, using our position of influence to create positive change. We recognise our role as social landlord goes beyond the bricks and mortar, and it's about creating a home and a new community for our residents that intertwines and complements the existing community. This is achieved through our long-term stewardship, which we retain on all of our developments, and this is no different for Southall. We've consulted extensively with the local community, and this active consultation doesn't end with a planning approval, and we look forward to continuing our work with local people and businesses to actively contribute to a wide range of areas, including our further public realm design, public art, and the community and commercial uses. We've also worked extensively with the planning team and to develop a scheme which will deliver the significant housing, employment and placemaking benefits. And consultation has included the GLA, Historic England and the Design Review Panel, who have all positively contributed to the design proposals. Our proposal will deliver for housing, the 564 new homes that you've seen, 50% of which will be affordable. 157 of those will be for residents currently on the housing waiting list, and it will make a significant contribution to the local housing needs and the council's housing targets. The development will be tenure blind, with all tenures having access to external private amenity space and access to shared podium gardens with designated young children's play space. And in addition, the communal areas will be finished to the same specification, helping to promote the social inclusivity and helping to foster balanced mixed communities in which we believe. For employment, it will create approximately 90 new jobs across a variety of use classes, and that could include the creative workshop style space, light industrial, office, retail and community space. It will deliver tangible economic benefits to Southall, both through the construction phase and the end user phase.
30 seconds remaining.
Placemaking, the design of the buildings showcase strong architectural design with the tall buildings that are grounded and provide a positive interaction with the street. The layout of the scheme will enhance permeability and pedestrian links, which will improve the walking journey times for other residents to the Southall train station. The public realm will use high quality materials with opportunities for sitting and dwell time to create a sense of place. We've been through, the officers touched on the environmental gains, so we're committed to providing those within the development. And this is an excellent scheme that we're proud to be part of, and hope it becomes a proud part of Southall in the future. So I trust you'll agree with the officer's recommendation for approval and resolve to grant the planning permission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you to both contributors for keeping their speeches to 3 minutes or below. Right, I was going to say at the beginning, and I forgot to say it, but I'm going to take one round of questions for each application tonight to try and move us on. So please, I mean, it doesn't mean you're restricted to one question, just I would rather not keep going back and forward with rounds of questions. So obviously, if your question is not being answered, we can come back to that. But please just be concise with your questions. And the other thing I would say is don't repeat what someone else has already asked. But, okay, if we can open it up for questions. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, just a quick one on a recurring theme that I will probably come back to again at future planning committees. Electric vehicle charging points in relation to both the public and the private parking. The recommendation or standard from the GLA is 20%, and we're giving 20% electric vehicle charging points to the private parking spaces, but only 10% on the public parking spaces. It just seems to me that we're making this transition from diesel and petrol vehicles to electric vehicles quicker than people anticipated. Everything seems to be moving towards electric vehicles much quicker than was originally thought. So it seems to me we should at least be meeting that 20% target. So I just want to know if there are any valid reasons why we can't do 20% on the public parking on this scheme.
Or conversely, can we?
So I answer the question, please, Chair?
Take all questions and then you can come in, okay?
Okay, Chair. So you want to take all the questions first, yeah?
Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Please carry on.
Councillor Conti.
Thank you. A couple of questions, sort of just following on about sort of, parking spaces. Obviously, the reduction of public parking space from 150 to 90 and only 60 parking spaces for 564 flats, so 11% of dwellings, just seems a drop in the ocean. Now, clearly, obviously, we are trying to get people out of petrol and diesel cars, but as Councillor Bell has just said, we're moving towards electric. And I think, obviously, an area that's also going to have retail and other space as well, isn't it? Is it not going to be an attractive area where people are wanting to come into the area? And is this not going to put further pressure on surrounding roads if there isn't adequate parking space in the area? My second question was just on the Section 106 money. The NHS contribution was £90,000. I was just, looking at building 564 flats. Many of them will have more than one person living in them. It just seems like a drop in the ocean in terms of contributions towards an area where there is already pressure on health services, and whether that's really being sort of addressed by the money that's being outlined here. They're my two questions. Thanks.
Councillor Anand.
My first question actually has been taken by Councillor Conti, but I would actually just follow up on that question, and that is that do we use any models or toolkits to actually come to those figures? And my other question is about the report shows that we have a shortfall in amenity space in both the younger children and the young adults as well. So there is a 2,000 shortfall on one side and then 17,000 square feet on another one. So have we really assessed the actual capacities of the other premises that we are relying that they'll be able to supply those shortfalls. And finally, Chair, I'd like to sort of like get a little bit more clarity on the bins and the locations and how they will be accessible to the residents. Thank you.
Have we got any other further questions? I have one question about car park allocation, how that's distributed. It seems to be on first come, first served basis. Can you just enlighten us? I'm looking over there because I think that's where Greg is.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I am. I'm writing this down.
Yes, okay, so am I. So,
Okay.
further questions, because I'm going to go into the debate if these are satisfactorily answered. Thank you. Right, no more questions, Greg, fire away.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to Councillor Bell's question about can't we have parity both for private and for public parking spaces when it comes to the provision of electric charging points, the committee can, of course, ask for those, Chair. It's perfectly reasonable to do so. I would say that if that's the wish of the committee, then a condition can be imposed to that effect. There are no obvious design restrictions within regard to the layout of the site that wouldn't provide for charging points to be included if that was the wish of the members. So that deals with that first point. The next questions were from Councillor Conti with regard to parking provision. We settled on a provision of 11% parking spaces for the residents. I'll deal with that first of all. Actually, no, let me deal with the public parking first, Chair. The 90 public car parking spaces is contained within the cabinet decision to put the site out to do development, and it was obviously a considered view of the authority, and Peabody have responded to that by providing 90 parking spaces in exchange. So they are performing their duty with regards to the development agreement. With regard to resident parking, Chair, the decision to provide 11% of spaces, but with the full provision of disability parking spaces within that number, was based on the capacity of the site and its relative proximity to Crossrail and bus transport facilities. It's a similar percentage that we have applied in other sites in this area. Certainly other applications that I've dealt with within the Green, the Working Men's Club, for example, King's House, a similar percentage was applied to the provision of parking. TfL have actually told us that they don't want any parking at all because they consider this site to be close enough to Crossrail not to necessitate any at all. I think that's a bridge too far, Chair. But it's worth pointing out, I think, for members' benefits, as I do in the briefing note, that in actual fact, TfL overlooked their own policy, which is that within this area, you could have up to 200 parking spaces within the scheme and meet their standards. So we consider the decision to employ 11% provision, which is effectively 60 resident spaces distributed between the two blocks, to be a reasonable and proportionate response. But I will accept that it is not mathematically based. It's just one that looks reasonable, plausible, and acceptable in the context of the site. That's the first point. The second point that Councillor Conti made with regard to the NHS contribution. To date, Chair, I still have not received any response from the NHS to our consultation request, and therefore, as indicated in the briefing note, Chair, the decision to allocate £90,000 is proportionate in our view, having regard to where we are. We always need to have regard, of course, to the fact that contributions should always fairly and reasonably relate to a development. We don't have any touchstone here from the NHS, but I think it would have been unreasonable of us as officers to allow this to have passed without any NHS contributions being sought, Chair, hence the figure being reached in that case. With regard to Councillor Annan's question actually, I think it was Councillor Annan who asked about the tools and the methods that we use to ascertain our parking standards, and I think I've answered that in my answer.
Contributions, Greg.
Oh, sorry, was it? I sort of answered that in the answer I gave just now with regard to the fact that we have employed what we as officers consider to be a reasonable contribution in this case, but there's no maths around it because we don't have any assistance from the NHS. So that is the number that's been chosen. If members consider it to be light, then we can certainly consider that, but we would have to have a reason as to why we should be asking the developer for more or less, as the case may be. I can't really expand on the answer any more than that. Sorry, I think I'm now on Councillor Annan's questions. And the one question I certainly have with regards to the shortfall in certain age groups, play space and amenity space provision within the scheme, as is often the case in these situations, Chair, the schemes do not meet the full standards because we need to strike a balance between the provision of development and the provision of space, with the main focus being on providing new dwellings and providing a reasonable balance of open space. The numbers have been shared with our leisure department and they have requested a financial contribution. They have not raised objections to the application, and the request for a financial contribution towards the improvement of facilities elsewhere, which are listed in the recommendation, Chair, is as put to us by the leisure department. So there are projects upon which they would spend the money, but in principle, the taking of a financial contribution is foursquare with our policy, Chair. Councillor Anand asked a question about, I'm sure it's Councillor Anand, about access to waste bins in the development, and I'm just going to ask Seva if he'd be so kind as to put screen up for me. Would you put up, is it possible, Chair, for Seva to put up a screen, because it's one of the images that we had in the presentation, and it'll be a lot easier to be able to talk to that one than to try and describe it to you at length.
Do you know which one it is?
Yeah. Yes, it is. It's number 11, Seva. Thank you. So what we have here basically, as you'll see, is that plan shows you the core. Whoop. Thank you. That plan, that's fine, Seva. So what you can see is within the various areas, there are cores within the blocks. If you look at block A, for example, it's a sort of a donut shape. And what happens is that the refuse collection areas are situated within the central parking and storage and cycle access areas, and therefore residents would have direct access from the core areas and from the lifts down to the ground floor to access the areas where the bins are situated on each of the floors. So there's direct access to the ground floor. We're not using chutes or any other such method to empty them, if that's clear. And then refuse collection vehicles would actually come, for example, in block A, would actually drive in to that area, that core area, collect the bins and then leave as part of a loop. And then but in relation to block B, there would be curbside collection from a lay-by for block B, and block C within the turning head that serves that development. So that, I hope, answers that question. And then lastly, Chair, your question with regard to car park allocation, I think as you put it, Chair, it is in essence first come, first served, but I have checked the position with the applicants today with regards to how that works. So in essence, the position with regards to disability parking is that it's all reserved and set aside for those persons who are disabled, and they will get first come, first served on the disability parking spaces within each of the phases. And then likewise with regard to the resident parking, there are no charges to any residents who wish to take a parking space, Chair, but the spaces will be leased, because that is the requirement of the London plan. So if a person sells their property for whatever reason or moves out, then their space will become available to somebody else. But there is no maintenance charge as such for the parking spaces themselves, and therefore no additional cost to tenant to whether they be rental or shared ownership or market units. I don't think there are any more questions, Chair.
No, that's it. That's the only questions I've had. Councillor Anand, I think you want to come back on
Yes, Chair.
Which one do you want to come back on?
On the healthcare provisions, I just want to
Healthcare
know
provisions.
more clarity with the fact of the HUDU model. And do we use that model to assess developments and financial contributions to the health service?
Well, thank you, Councillor. We don't use it. The NHS uses it and gives us the figure, Chair. And because they haven't responded to us, we've had nothing to interrogate in this case.
Okay, I think that's clear. They haven't come back. They've
No.
the boat, I think Greg is trying to say. So right, I'm going to open it up for debate. If anyone wants to make any points, anyone wants to speak. Councillor Anand.
Thank you, Chair. I do welcome this proposal. It's very good. In all respects, it's providing the much needed housing we need in the borough. However, I am very much concerned with the figure of the NHS contribution. I can accept the point that we can't give the amenity space that we need, but I'm very much concerned, and I would request if it's possible that we actually have something in the section 106 to actually reflect the contribution. I'm not going to jump ahead of another item in the agenda, but just an example, there is something in the following agendas which is actually a much smaller project and showing a much larger contribution. So I would request that if there is a provision that we can actually make a larger contribution towards the NHS. Thank you.
Before I invite the officers to come in, I think Greg's already answered it in terms of the NHS have not responded. So we're basically plucking a number out of the air. But Jackie, do you want to come in?
One possibility would be to delegate authority to an officer to explore and discuss with the NHS what figure they might want, and then obviously that wouldn't necessarily be accepted, but that could be part of a negotiation which then could be agreed following consultation with the chair, if that's acceptable.
Okay, this seems perfectly sensible to me. I'm not seeing any more indications. I must say that I do have to add this, or potentially add this condition that Councillor Bell has raised about the 20% electric vehicle charges. So I should formally take a vote on that, should I not?
Yes, when it comes to the vote, you could take
So,
it.
well, I'm going to go to the vote at the moment because no one is indicating to speak. So I'm minded to go to the vote. So I'm going to take this condition first. So the proposal is to have a 20% electrical vehicle provision for the public parking, if I've captured that correctly. So that's the proposal, to add a condition or amend the condition for that. So all those in favour of that, please show. I think that's unanimous. So I won't go to all those. There's no one against and there's no one abstaining on this. So, okay. So with that condition added or amended, I should say, I'm going to go to the vote for this. So
Chair,
I was going to go to the vote, but
Sorry,
Councillor
Chair.
Nance jumped in.
Sorry, Chair. So when we are voting, are we going to be voting for the amended condition on the NHS as well? Or are we?
We are voting for the discussion with the NHS and it coming back through the chair.
Yep, thank you.
As Jackie highlighted. Okay, so I'm going to go to the vote. So all those in favour of this application, the Green Southall, please indicate. I can't see you, Councillor Conti. All right, okay. So all those, so if you've got that, Katie, the number. All those against, please show. I think I can see his hand now, Councillor Conti. Could you just move a little bit, because I can't really see you very well. Thank you. So one against. Any abstentions? No, that's it. So that is carried past, whatever you wish to call it. So we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which I have moved up the agenda, which is 1 Pitsanger Lane. So, so we have Harini to Oh, yes, wait a minute, Harini, sorry. I'll come and get, where you going to be? Where you going to be? Please don't let me forget that we're to go and get Councillor Bell after this, or someone to get him.
Yeah. Shall I start?
When Harini is in the room,
Yeah,
so that's
hello.
helpful.
Is this
So
working?
Harini is going to present this report in front of us for 1 Pitshanger Lane. Is there a problem?
Oops. Okay. So presenting 1 Pitshanger
All right.
Lane.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Can you? We okay? Okay. Away you go, Harini.
Okay, presenting 1 Pitshanger Lane. This is the site contact. This is the site. It's on the corner of Pitshanger Lane and
Harini, can I just check with the committee and people in the room? Can they hear, Harini? I didn't think so. Maybe you want the mic a bit closer.
is that better?
That's far better, yes. Can you all hear at the back? Right.
Okay, this is the site outlined in red. It fronts Pitshanger Lane and is also on the corner of Kent Gardens. As you can see, there's a wide roundabout and Scotch Common to the east. In terms of surrounding buildings, this is the site outlined in red. We have Woodbury Court, which is a locally listed building. We have a 3-storey Park Lodge, Building C. We have Terrace of Road shops within the Pitshanger Lane neighbourhood centre. We also have a 3-storey building here, another 3-storey building, 4 stories and 3 stories, and another 4-storey at A, which is opposite to the development site. Majority of the houses along Kent Gardens and opposite in Woodbury Park Road are 2-storey. This slide shows the footprint of the existing with the proposed development around it. So the orange shading is the footprint of Kent Lodge as it is, and the black outline is that of the new development. These arrows show the entrances to the building, and the yellow arrow is the entrance for deliveries. This diagram also shows a relationship to number 3 Pitshanger Lane, which is, I don't know if you can see a pointer, which is to the east of the site, and then also 22 Kent Gardens, which is to the south of the site. This slide also shows the trees which are to be retained on site. So these are the trees to be retained. In terms of, oh, sorry, I've gone past. How do I go back? Okay. In terms of impacts to neighbours, first site is 22 Kent Gardens, which is to the south. In particular, there's a change of ground level which is being retained, so the building isn't going to be levelled with the property adjacent at 22 Kent Gardens. There was an issue with windows facing the development. These are on the flank of 22 Kent Gardens. The first window was in the roof and is a secondary window to a bedroom. In terms of overlooking from new flank wall windows to the development, there are 2 which are circled in red at the top in the diagram. The diagram below shows that overlooking will not be direct because of the steepness of the gradient into the window, but also there's a parapet wall here. And there's also another bedroom window to the back and on first floor of 22 Kent Gardens. Again, the relationship with the windows above the flank wall is quite steep, and it's unlikely there will be direct overlooking. In terms of the balconies to the proposed development, which face inwards, there will be high screens, so there will be no direct overlooking into the neighbouring property from these either. In relation to number 3 Pitshanger Lane, this is the property. You can see there's a terrace to the side which directly abuts the flank wall of 3 Pitshanger Lane. There are a number of flank wall windows along this neighbouring property. The applicant has provided a diagram to show the distances in terms of relationship to number 3 Pitshanger Lane. The main concern was direct overlooking from a window here. From this window here. Because of the existing relationship with the terrace, it means there is actually direct overlooking already to this window in particular. As such, the removal of the terrace and the drawing back of the building would actually create a better relationship in terms of amenity impacts to this window. The diagram below shows this is a bedroom, but it is a secondary window. The main window to this bedroom is to the rear. Slide. This slide shows the footprint of the different floors to the building. So this is the ground floor, again showing the relationship to the 2 neighbouring properties. You can see that the ground floor is pulled away from 3 Pitshanger Lane. And for the first floor, you can see, again, the building is, there's still quite a good space between the 2 buildings. Second floor shows a shrinking away of the upper floor from the rear of Pitshanger Gardens, and you can see there's a green roof space here. And in terms of relationship with number 22 Kent Gardens, again, there is the building steps away. In terms of the height change, you can see how the building draws back in as it approaches the corner of the property towards Pitshanger Lane, which is to the north, and Kent Gardens, which would be to the west. This is the 4th story, which is much smaller than the floors below, and 5th story. But in particular, objection was raised about the upper floors. The 8th story you can see is quite small, the 7th story is just below, and the 6th story. In terms of green credentials, the building would have an air source heat pump supplemented by PV panels. It would retain nine trees on site, 7 trees would be removed, planting of 14 new semi-mature trees. There'd be intensive green roof. The urban factor for the building would be 0.53, which is greater than the London Plan target of 0.4. This would be secured by condition. In terms of design, these are some of the pictures that have been put forward. You can see the articulation to the front, and you can see the height is purely in the corner where Pitshanger Lane and Kent Gardens meet. This picture shows the views along Pitshanger Lane. This one shows the view from Kent Gardens towards Pitshanger Lane. This is the central courtyard, and this is a view from eye level at pavement. In terms of housing, the development will provide 60 new units. 19 of these would be affordable, which is 35% in accordance with London Plan. 6 of these units will be wheelchair housing, 3 of which will be shared ownership. In terms of quality of housing, all apartments will be dual aspect. Private amenity is provided at 5 square meters and above. There's also a communal courtyard, and there's cycle parking and in private and communal spaces. In terms of planning balance, there'll be new housing, 19 affordable new houses, quite a high urban green factor. It will be a new building with an improved carbon footprint. There'll be increased footfall to Pitshanger Neighbourhood Centre and Section 106 contributions of 600,000. I'll just end on this slide. The end.
Okay, thank you, really. Right, we have some speakers. I've got the, can you turn your mic off for me, please? Thank you. Okay, so I have some speakers. We have Deborah Edwards, the objector. If you're ready to speak, I think you probably heard me say earlier, you will get a reminder. We've got 3 minutes, you've got a reminder at 30 seconds out, and then we will bring you to a halt at 3 minutes. But okay.
Thank you. I'm chair of the Pitsanger Community Association. Our community welcomes appropriate development on this site in line with planning policies. Policy D3 of the London Plan states development proposals should enhance local context by delivering buildings and spaces that positively respond to local distinctiveness and the existing character of a place. Policy 7.4 of Ealing's development plan states that development in Ealing's existing built areas should complement the surrounding area. That point is reinforced in the council's work on its new local plans. The overbearing nature of the development on 22 Kent Gardens and 3 Pitsanger Lane will affect their light, privacy and way of life, important planning issues, thanks to the development being right up against their boundary walls. The concerns of these and others who live in the surrounding roads have been dismissed wrongly. There's no clear assurance about access to North Ealing Primary School. The London Plan also says that buildings like this should be near transport hubs. This area isn't. There is considerable strain on public transport now. The addition of 60 extra residences will exacerbate this. Some 550 objectors, the vast majority of whom live and work in the immediate area, consider that the development is out of character with the area. Only 15, one in the area, supported it. The London Plan says tall buildings are those not less than 6 stories or 18 metres measured from ground to floor to the uppermost story. It also says that these buildings should only be developed in locations identified as suitable by local councils. This is a tall building. The top 3 stories cannot be simply shrugged away. And Pitsanger is not in any of Ealing's designated areas for tall buildings. In summary, this proposed development does not comply with the London or Ealing's planning policy. It extensively and adversely affects light and privacy on a large number of properties, in particular the immediate residents. The PTAL figures cannot support the increase in local population.
30 seconds.
It's out of character and unsympathetic to the area. A tall building is a tall building. An area is either suitable or not suitable. It should be in character or not. We think the council should honour its planning policies and therefore request the committee to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Within the 3 minutes, thank you. We have Justin Kenworthy from the agent.
No, sorry, Chair, it's Kieran Rush for this one. That one? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, Kieran Rush, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Kieran Rush. I'm Planning Director at Stantec UK, and we're the planning agents for the application before you tonight. The applicant is Base Green Holding 2 Limited, a small Ealing-based house builder. The site was a care home operated by Shaw Healthcare, specialist care home operator. The building is at the end of its economic life and does not meet modern day requirements. Shaw took the decision to close the facility and have worked very closely with the council's adult care services to decant the occupants to better accommodation. Care home is now empty, with all tenants rehoused. Proposals are for a replacement U-shaped building that steps up in scale from 2 stories adjacent 22 Kent Gardens and is part 2, part 3 and part 4 stories adjacent 3 Pitsanger Lane, and it rises to 8 stories at its highest point on the Pitshanger Lane, Kent Gardens corner facing the roundabout. At its highest point, the building is approximately 38 metres away from Woodbury Park Road properties and approximately 30.4 metres and 35.2 metres away from Woodbury Court and Edward Court opposite. 60 new homes are proposed, with 35% as affordable, of which 62% are for affordable rent. These affordable units are based on the family-sized rented accommodation that Aileen desperately needs, including 7 3 or 4 bedroom family homes at London affordable rent. This is strongly supported by council housing officers. We've sought to deliver a sustainable building following the lean, clean, green and be seen energy approach, and seek to deliver towards a zero carbon target. Our approach to reducing carbon has resulted in a 67% reduction in emissions through air source heat pumps, solar panels and better materials. No gas boilers or fossil fuels are proposed. Be a mainly parking-free development with ample secure bike storage and 3 disabled parking bays. These will have active electrical charging points from day one. We've sought to increase the biodiversity on the site. Mature boundary trees are retained with 2 new trees planted for every one that's lost. The new trees will be planted as larger specimen trees between 5 to 7.5 metres girths. The scheme seeks to create small pocket habitats to provide shelter for amphibians, insects, bats, hedgerows and birds. Green roofs are proposed to increase the wildlife habitat and reduce water runoff. And as you've heard from the officer, the urban green factor score is 0.53. The design team engaged with the community, the MP, the PVTA and ward councillors, and made changes to the proposed scheme where possible. We consider the proposals represent a high quality and sustainable scheme, and 60 new homes were provided, of which 35% are proposed as affordable, with 62% as affordable rent. Taking all these factors into account, we hope that the members will support the officer recommendation for approval tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kieran. Okay, so we have local MP, James Murray. I think he's joining us virtually. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm here, Councillor.
I heard a rumble.
Can you hear me, Councillor Wall?
I can hear you. Can you all hear? At the back, can you hear? Speak, James, for a second.
Yes, sorry, I'm just calling in from Parliament because I've just finished voting. So sorry, I'm doing this virtually from here.
It's a bit muffled. Have you?
Let me just try if I can change microphone. Is that any better? Is that any better? Can you hear me?
Hold on a minute, James. We're trying to stop sharing the screen. It might help. Try now, James.
Hi, can you hear me any better now?
Yeah, I think that's better. Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up from the back of the room.
Great.
There you go. You've got, by the way, I should let you know, you've got up to 5 minutes. You don't have to use the 5 minutes, but you've got up to 5 minutes.
Great. That's very delicately put, Ray. Don't feel the need to use all 5 minutes is what you're saying. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for letting me address the committee. I want to see more genuinely affordable homes built in the area I represent. And I also believe that, notwithstanding any issues relating to the services at Kent Lodge Care Home, this site could accommodate new housing. However, I consider this proposed development to be wrong for this location, as it is contrary to planning policy for this site, and I will use my remarks to set out why. I met with the applicants in December 2020 to express my concerns, particularly about the building's height and design. Although the applicants have since removed the top frame in the corner of the building, the height and design of the proposal is essentially unchanged. There are 3 key policy tests in the New London Plan adopted in March 2021, which I believe these proposals fail to meet. First, policy H1 of the New London Plan encourages new housing development to focus on sites with an existing or planned PTAL rating of 3 to 6. The PTAL rating for this site is 2, and therefore is within the lower half of the total PTAL range. Now, I know that the PTAL rating for this site is forecast to increase to 3 by 2031, but the case officer's report says this is due to the completion of HS2. The forecast in 10 years also still shows the site entirely surrounded by areas of PTAL 1B or 2. Now, I appreciate that complex calculations go into PTAL ratings, but it seems to me that the forecast increase to 3 being predicated on the back of HS2 and being surrounded by areas that will remain at PTAL 1B or 2 must be marginable or questionable. It therefore does not feel appropriate to prioritise this site for development of this intensity. Second, policy D3 part D1 of the New London Plan requires that developments have, and I quote, due regard to existing and emerging street hierarchy, building types, forms and proportions. In paragraph 11 of that section, it goes on to say proposals must respond to the existing character of a place. In my mind, these proposals fail these design tests. The design and massing of the development does not pay regard to the character of the high street on Pitzhanger Lane. They also ignore the form and proportions of nearby residential blocks like Clifton Court. The existing Clifton Court on the other side of the roundabout is half the number of stories and, unlike the proposals before us, is generously set back from the road. And third, policy D9 of the New London Plan explains that tall buildings can be defined as anything of 6 stories or more, a definition that would easily capture the tallest part of this development. That part of the policy says that boroughs should determine if there are locations where tall buildings may be an appropriate form of development. Now, the case officer's report acknowledges that the current site does not fall within such a designation. However, in the context of other local policies, the site is not considered unsuitable for one, and as such should be assessed alongside other development plan policies. I simply don't follow that logic. In my mind, this location has not been identified already as appropriate for tall buildings, and it seems very unlikely that that would be the case in future. Its context is defined by the 2- and 3-story shopping parade on Pitzhanger Lane, and as I mentioned, homes or blocks typically up to a maximum of 3 or 4 stories nearby. I would therefore urge the planning committee to reject this application. I am sure alternative options could be made to work here if the applicant were to listen more closely to local residents and follow more closely relevant planning policy. However, the specific application we have before us does not, in my mind, succeed in this regard, and so I believe it is appropriate to reject it. Thank you.
Thank you. And you took my advice in a lot less than 5 minutes. Thank you, James. Okay, right. I think there's a lot there from the objector and from James Murray that we might need to come back on now rather than wait for the questions and lose those. Is there anything you want to respond to there from Rini or Alex, whichever?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, all right. I'm going to open it up for questions, and I'm going to do the same here. We're going to have one round of questions, and you can fire away with your questions, but I'm just going to have one round, okay? Okay, Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification with the officer. As you know that the number 3 Pitzhanger Lane, I just wanted to know the clarification, the impact of this development on Pitzhanger Lane 3, especially you describe in your report it's a terrace. So I just wanted to know, is it terrace or is it the fire escape for the residents?
It's.
I'm going to take them all at once, if that's okay. Councillor Young.
Can I just clarify? It's proposed to be a low-car development because presumably without it being a low-car development, there'll be a nuisance to the neighbouring properties. But can I clarify where the CPZ starts and finishes? It says it's in a controlled parking zone.
Yeah, so I think.
Right, now I can speak. Right, any other questions? Councillor County.
Sorry. I just wanted some clarity on the point that the MP, James Murray, made around the designation of the area. So it's clearly not designated as an area for tall buildings. And it was just, why is it felt that it is appropriate here? Because if we're not following areas that are being designated, then essentially what's the point in having certain areas designated at all? Are we, if we can then just build any, tall buildings anywhere that we want? So it was just really, because it's not really clear in the report why we came to that, why officers came to that conclusion.
I don't see any other indications for questions. Right, would the officer like to come back on those, please, or officers?
CPZ, I think the CPZ is basically around the site and goes backwards down Kent Gardens. In terms of...
Sorry, no one can hear you. If you haven't got your mic on, should I say? And
sorry,
are you querying the question? The answer.
Just want to clarify that the roads to the north then are not covered. Is Templewood covered?
I'll have to come back to you about that specific road, but to the north, from what I recall, they aren't. Northeast. No, I don't think so. No, but there is section 106 contribution for reassessment of the CPZ.
That's assuming that if you did have another vote, and it was quite controversial, I think, when it went in, that you're assuming that people would vote in favour of the CPZ for the local development to work. Otherwise, they'll just park in neighbouring streets.
By very nature, yes. Your question was answered, Councillor Young. So next question was, sorry.
Not designated.
Councillor Mahmood's was about 3 Pitshanger Lane.
3 Pitshanger Lane. So there is a terrace to the side of the property onto which there's an external staircase. And from what I've been told, the staircase is used regularly to enter into training rooms to the side, but there is also a terrace for a fire escape. Does that make sense?
Come in, please.
So obviously the committee visited the site on Saturday. We all stood on the terrace, or I would actually accurately describe it as a sort of fire escape arrangement to the building. I believe that's what you're referring to. I understand from some of the correspondence from neighbouring properties that there's been some question about the description of whether that is a terrace or a fire escape. I would argue that it's probably a fire escape, and we all saw what it was like on site, and we all stood and looked at the context. So hopefully that clarifies that point. Is that the question that you wanted to answer, Councillor Mahmood? Okay.
And Councillor Conti's question about designation.
The site isn't designated, and there are specific sites designated within the borough, but then it doesn't mean that other sites within the borough shouldn't have tall buildings, because they might emerge later on. So my viewpoint was this site presents quite an open vista which can support a taller building at one point, and that's the corner, because it is a corner site. And then the design of the building steps downwards as it goes along Kent Gardens and Pitshanger Lane. So it's basically that corner site, which is quite an open vista, and it acts as a wayfinder from site.
I'll just come back in on that as well. Obviously, this picks up on James Murray's comment in relation to policies set out in the London plan, which is obviously a newly adopted plan. And clearly, obviously, the new adopted plan specifies where that in consideration of taller buildings, the boroughs need to obviously allocate and designate areas for suitable for tall buildings. Obviously, we're not at that stage. We're just embarking on our local plan review. So there is a sort of strange position for us. But just following on from the case officer's description, and also what we've seen tonight in the presentation and on site, I think we need to be very clear about the majority of this proposal is on the lower levels. There's only smaller elements which obviously would be classified as that kind of taller element to the proposal. So I think that's really clear and should have come across in the presentation, that the taller elements, the majority of the building is ground, first, second, and then obviously the above those floor levels, the building starts to reduce in its form, which I think for the site is probably quite is entirely approachable, logical for the site. Yes, we saw that there's a point on the corner of Pitshanger Lane and Kent Gardens where the building is a slightly taller element, but it is for a small portion of that. What we are being asked to do is obviously consider its impact on those neighbouring properties in terms of whether it affects their amenity in a harmful way. So sunlight, daylight, privacy, all of those issues have been examined, and I'm hoping that the committee also benefited from the site visit by actually viewing it in context. The majority of this scheme is actually laid out resembling the existing building form. So it's a building which obviously wraps around those two roads, and it's quite similar in that respect. We pointed out the differences to you as well on site, and we've also, as part of the presentation, shown you those differences too. I think you need to also appreciate that there is a mixture of building heights in that immediate context. Again, there's reference to a majority of two-storey buildings in Pitshanger Lane, but there of course are a mixture of building typologies and building heights, and how they relate to those, to their spaces or their plots is also quite different. Yes, this scheme is different, and it is introducing a different scale, but we also must bear in mind that is part of optimization of sites and considerations in development proposals. What you need to do as the committee is also weigh up the impacts of the proposals and whether it does introduce that harm. Some of what is being said tonight, and I would say, is quite subjective, whether something is in character or not in character. The officer's judgment being presented tonight is outlining those benefits, and it does follow on from quite considerable pre-application discussions, which the local community were obviously part of. And I would argue that some of those amendments have actually been made as a consequence of those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I'm not, well, we've finished with questions, so I'm going into the debate now, if that's okay. And I like...
CPZs, if that's...
Please do, Jackie, CPZs, information.
Just to confirm, I've looked up the location of Kent Gardens CPZ, and as Marie indicated, it goes south of Pitshanger Lane down Castle Bar Park, Kent Gardens, and south of Scotch Common down Kent Avenue, but not north.
Okay. Right, so I'm opening up for debate, and the first person I see is Councillor Conti.
Thank you. I'm really concerned about this development. I respect, obviously, what the officers have come to and in terms of their view on it. I think there's a number of things that I'm concerned about. One is, having visited the site and also looking at the images and the plans that have been provided, I know it's subjective when you talk about character, but it isn't in keeping with anything at all in the immediate area. It doesn't look like the other buildings and the style of the buildings around. It's also that the scale and the bulk of the building is like nothing similar in the local area. I know it's only certain points that go up to the 8-storey, but it's still going to that tall. It's going to be, you're going to notice it, you're going to see it. It's going to be, the scale of it is going to be noticeable, especially to the people living in the close vicinity. Also, when we visited the site on Saturday, I think you can really appreciate how close you are. And I understand there is obviously the fire escape, and part of the building already runs very close to number 3 and Pitshanger Lane and Kent Gardens. However, the addition of the rooms looking directly out in that towards number 3 and where the kitchen is, I think, in Kent Gardens, they are going to be overlooked. I think this development isn't sympathetic at all, and I think that it needs to go back and essentially come back with something that is not as tall, more in keeping with the area, and is more sympathetic to residents who are already living in close proximity to it.
Councillor Nance, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Having heard both sides of the debate here, from the objectors and the agents, we can see that there is it's been discussed already, that it's little tall, it's a tall building, or it's considered by some as tall. There are overshadowing aspects as well. On the other note, we have to offset some of this to the gain we're getting. And the gain we're getting is that we're getting houses, affordable houses. The tenure of these mix is quite good. You're getting some large family homes as well. So, and we have a large waiting list in our area. And in addition to that, when I speak to people on doors, they are families that are actually wanting their members of families to live nearer, but they can't. And if we don't actually start accepting these small patches of developments, we can't just have tall buildings in one side and and satisfy our housing demand. We can't. And for that reason, bearing in mind with all the objections, with that reason in mind, I'll be supporting this application tonight.
Right, Councillor Brett.
Thank you, Chair. Probably to reiterate a little bit of what the councillors just said, just around the fact that.
Could you bring your microphone closer?
Sorry, yeah.
I'm not sure everyone
can you hear me now? Yeah. Just to kind of reiterate some of the stuff that the councillors just mentioned around the fact that we are getting quite a good mix of affordable homes. However, looking and knowing the area myself, it is out of keeping. And at one point it is on average 5 stories taller than average buildings around that area. And so from my perspective, I think that that's a sacrifice too far in that local area. And I think that it needs to be re-looked at. So I will not be supporting this application tonight.
Sorry, Councillor Mahmood, did you indicate?
Yeah, just to quickly, Chair, I completely reiterate what Councillor Anand said about that in terms of a mix and good combination of affordable housing. Really, we are really running out of housing supply, and we are very desperate for affordable housing. So I understand whenever you are going to develop, and especially very close to the residential area, I have good sympathy from the number 3 Pitchangle Lane and the Kent Lodge. But in the broader picture, I think we are gaining more than we lose. So I'm intent to support that application.
Any other contributions? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I think the impact on number 22 Kent Gardens is unacceptable. The room which the officers wrongly thought was a garage is going to be unacceptably impacted, and as shown on the briefing notes which were given to us this evening. That's a utility room come kitchen come diner, and it's got a roof light which will be in shadow if the new development goes ahead, and the rear access to it will also be in shadow. I'm also worried about the impact of the on-street parking this development would give. The CPZ barely covers 2 of the surrounding streets. The majority of the surrounding roads are not covered by a CPZ. And although a contribution to a further consultation is included in the package, it is no guarantee whatsoever that Pitchangle Lane will agree to a CPZ. There are violent opposition to proposals to bring one in previously, and I think that this development goes a step too far, and I would vote against it.
Councillor Conlon.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main argument in favour of this development is the housing, and in particular the affordable housing element. And I am very much in favour of that. But, you know, the other side of the balance is that it does, you know, it does clearly break policy D9 on tall buildings. Now, the officers have said, okay, we think it's acceptable to do that. In this case, it's just a little bit of the building, you know, and it's the bit just by the roundabout rather than the bit immediately next to neighbouring properties and so on. You know, but even so, I think it is, you know, just a bit too high for this location. If it was, you know, 5 or 6 stories, I don't think there would be any problem in my mind. But going up, you know, a few stories above that is I think a bit too high. And the design in general, you know, doesn't really respond to the character of the area. And, you know, I think it could do, you know, with a bit more work. But as it is at the moment, it's really quite incongruous. And there is also the matter of the harm to the neighbouring properties. And in particular, I think it is number 22, Kent Gardens, that has the, you know, the most harm. So, you know, weighing up all those factors in the balance, you know, I'm inclined to, you know, vote against this, because I think, you know, the developer could come back with another scheme that, you know, still provides most of the affordable housing, but has a more sympathetic design, and doesn't give rise to the same negatives that there are in this particular proposal.
Councillor Martin.
So I'm actually been struggling with myself about weighing up the different benefits and issues that my fellow councillors have raised. And I do think, you know, there's a lot of good in the proposal. It does provide us with affordable housing. It's also a sustainable scheme. I think there's some very interesting points that the developers made about that, and the ideas behind it are great. I think the flip side of that is the height, and I think possibly overbearing nature of how it's looking on that corner. And I'm weighing the two up. And at the moment, I actually can't decide. So I think I'm going to end up having to abstain, I'm afraid.
Okay, I don't see any further people indicating. So let me try and say what I'm thinking. So, okay, so we've had bits about style locally. I think, you know, that style is the eye of the beholder in terms of this, really. I mean, there is a lot of small scale housing. There is what I would call a newish estate right next to it across the road from Kent Gardens, which is not in the style of the local area. So the local area is not one homogeneous style. So I don't think that is, you know, we would never build anything else apart from Victorian housing if we carried on just using one style, and things move on, change happens. I think it really, it's about the scale really for me, the height and what it does to the immediate neighbours, what it does to in terms of what it looks like in terms of the area. For me, I think 3 Pitshanger Lane, from the site visit the other day, I think there's less of an impact. I think the impact, if there is any impact, is on 22 Kent Gardens for me. And I think the stepping away from that and the stepping away from 3 Pitshanger Lane actually allows the height to form towards the corner of the site, which is opposite the Woodbury Court and basically on the roundabout. So for me, I'm content that the officer has pushed the bulk of the massing to the corner away from the 2 main properties that are impacted or potentially impacted. So minded to vote in favour of this development tonight because of the housing and not just because there's affordable housing in it, because there's housing in it. But okay, I don't see anyone else indicating, so I'm going to go to the vote. So all those in favour, please show. All those against? Five. One abstention. You abstaining, councillor. So I knew you'd do that to me. So it is 5 each, and it goes to a casting vote, and the chair gets the casting vote. So I'm not minded to change my mind from the vote, so I'll be voting in favour with my casting vote. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Orion Park. Who's the officer? Orion Park. Sean, would you like to outline the report? Sorry, Councillor Martin. Pardon? Oh, yes. The one thing I said to remind myself about, and I left him out there. Does anyone else want a comfort break quickly? Right, while we summons Councillor Bell back into the room, and Councillor Martin has now gone to use the facilities. I'll wait, because if she's not in the room, then I did ask if anyone wanted a comfort break. No one took me up, but Councillor Martin has taken me up because she went out of the room. So she proposed it, I think. So I'll wait a couple of minutes. If you wish to use the facilities, please do. I'll give it 2-3 minutes. If you can be as quick as possible, that would be appreciated. Right. Is all the committee? Right. Shall we, are we all here? I don't really mind anyone else not being here, but the committee needs to be here, and the officer, Sean, who is going to give the presentation tonight. So, Sean, away you go, please.
Hello. So this application is Orion Park, and it's located in the Northfields ward, opposite Northfields Underground Station, on the western side of Northfield Avenue and just north of the Piccadilly line railway tracks headed towards Heathrow Airport. The local area is predominantly residential, except down Northfield Avenue, which is predominantly commercial at ground floor and then residential on the upper floors. So tonight's application is the minor material amendment compared to the previously consented in 2018 and subsequent NMA approved last year. The proposed scheme proposes an uplift of 19 units from 76 to 95 and an uplift of family units from 18 to 24. This is a 100% affordable housing scheme, including 23 London affordable rent units and 72 shared ownership units, an increase of 65% compared to the previous scheme. All units will have access to private amenity space, and there is an increase in communal amenity space. The number of dual aspect units has increased as a percentage, and the number of car park spaces has increased by 1. Additionally, there is an in-site servicing facility within the site compared to the previous scheme, which was on-site, off-site even on Northfield Avenue. This diagram explains the difference in height between the different blocks as well as the infilled elements. So block A is closest to Northfield Avenue, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. That is increasing from 6 to 8 stories. Block B increases from 5 to 6. Block C stays at 4, and block D goes from 3 to 5. Additionally, the footprint is altered with infilling the elements between blocks A, B, and C. However, the overall layout of the scheme remains consistent with the previous extant consent. During the application, we've been advertising through the Gazette and through site notices around local properties, with 160 objections raised. These covered a variety of issues, and they are outlined in the committee report and on the screen at the moment. The main reason is the extent it's expired and that the scheme is too large. A CPE was approved earlier in the year, which confirmed that the permission had been commenced. Part of the description was to do with the demolition of the buildings, and that has completed, as committee members may have noted on site at the weekend. So again, with the this is just a diagram of this difference in height and scale compared to the extent. So the yellow is the extent and the orange is the additional. So as you can see with block A, the additional height is all set in compared to the extent. And the bulk of the additional proposal is between the blocks, with only a slight alterations to height on blocks B and D. Again, block D has also been moved closer to blocks A, B, and C to provide a natural bookend type site to Northcroft Avenue. So one of the main concerns raised was about the impact to neighbours, and the same neighbours that were concerned in the extant permission have been reviewed for this permission. And overall, it was considered that the impact would be comparable to the previous consent. It is noted that the buildings have been moved backwards towards the trade tracks away from properties along Belsize Avenue by between 1 and 10 metres at a variety of points, depending on the different parts, property infill bits, which obviously are new elements. However, they are further back than the main bulk of A, B, and C blocks. Also, block D has been moved forward, as I said, which means they are set further away from Jefferson Close. This is one of the images which are in the committee report, which shows the overshadowing. And whilst there is some increase in overshadowing, predominantly this is contained within the development site, with only a small increase to some gardens in the surrounding areas. It is also noted that some gardens have a better impact, less of an impact on shadowing compared to the previous, to the extant consent even. It's also, we've had several representations from residents in Mayo Court, which is the block of flats nearest to Block D. This image, I note, is not in the committee report, and if any members want to go back to this during any comments, please let me know. But the difference between the two blocks is about 3 meters separation distance from the bookend of Mayo Court and this development, which is still consistent with the urban grain for the surrounding development. It is also noted that the windows on the flank elevation of Mayo Court are secondary windows serving kitchens. This is similar to the extant permission in terms of the outlook and overlooking from this permission. It's also noted that there is an increase in vegetation coverage along the boundary between this scheme and Mayo Court to further protect the amenity of neighbouring properties. Again, if you want to go back to this slide, please ask away. In terms of future residents, there is a number of enhancements to the scheme compared to the extant permission. Every unit will have access to private amenity space, and there is an increase in communal amenity space, including play space within the site. All units meet the technical housing standards in terms of floor space and bedrooms, as well as this being the 100% affordable housing scheme with a mixture of LAR and shared ownership throughout the scheme, as noted in the different floor plans, which you may have seen. Additionally, there is some additional planting along the boundary with Belsize Avenue properties, noted in the top right of this image, where it says number 1. This was revised during the planning process, which had a servicing bay, and this has been relocated closer to the commercial units in order to give a breakaway in terms of noise and to help protect the amenity of residents along Belsize Avenue. Again, with this diagram explains further the loading bay, and you can see it's near to the entrance of the commercial residential lobby to the rear. Based on this site, there is an increase of 1 car parking space, so it's not considered to be a significant increase compared to the extant permission. It's also noted that all parking spaces have either active or passive provision with corresponding conditions attached to this recommendation. In terms of cycle parking, there is an increase in both short stay and long stay. And in terms of safety, because of the long views along the street, it's considered to deter antisocial behaviour, and the bookend on Block D with a natural outlook onto the Mayo Court car parking, again to deter antisocial behaviour. It is noted that there is a secure by design condition as well, in order for it to be consulted with the Metropolitan Police. So to conclude, this minor material amendment is an uplift of 19 units, an increase of 6 family-sized units, and an increase in affordable housing from 35 to 100%. It also increases private and communal amenity space and the number of dual aspect units on the site. It is noted that the impact to neighbouring properties outlined in the committee report are comparable to the extant permission because of the increased separation distance, which offsets some of the height. Therefore, the proposal is recommended to grant with conditions subject to the Section 106 legal agreement outlined in the report. Just to highlight a few things in the briefing note, Condition 2 has had some updates with minor changes to reflect the plan numbers. It is noted that no plans have changed, it's just to reflect the updated ones received during the process. Condition 37 has had a slight rephrasing in terms of the site clearance aspect added, and that figures 2, 13, 22 and 24 have been updated with the most recent images. Some were contained in this PowerPoint, and again, I can go back to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. We have 3 speakers actually, sorry. We have Carol Atkinson, objector from Ealing Fields Residents Association. Carol, I think you've heard me say it enough. You've got 3 minutes, you'll be 30 seconds out, you'll be prompted, and we will stop at 3 minutes. Thank you.
Right, as mentioned, I'm representing Ealing Fields Residents Association, whose catchment area includes Belsize Avenue, Jefferson Close and Derwent Yard opposite the site. While we accept the need for more housing, there are major concerns about the impact of the increased height on residents, together with the design being out of character with the area. Block A, fronting Northfield Avenue, is not in keeping with surrounding area. It would have been preferable to see a design that respects the Art Deco character of Northfields Tube Station and the Derwent Yard flats opposite. The increased size of this block would have a major effect on Derwent Yard with loss of light to several of the flats. 8 windows were identified in the original application. While blocks B and C have moved slightly further away from the houses on Bellside Avenue, the outcome of this has resulted in increased height, which will impact residents in terms of overshadowing and overlooking. Block D at the rear of Mayo Court will be considerably taller, which will have a detrimental effect on the elderly residents of this sheltered scheme. It also appears that development is not gated, which gives rise to security concerns. There are known issues with street drinkers and drug dealing in that location, and an open development provides an opportunity for people to gain access and operate unseen. I attended the site visit, but the area behind the houses in Jefferson Close was inaccessible as a metal barrier prevented access. It has been greatly excavated. For what reason, we don't know and we're never informed. This area is to be a garden, a logical use for this very narrow end of the site. However, there are concerns about noise, antisocial behaviour and overlooking. The potential number of people who can use the garden at any one time will dramatically affect the ability of these residents to enjoy their gardens and homes in the summer. Historically, noise and overlooking resulted in various planning applications being refused, and in one case, enforcement. Gating and restricting access to certain hours does not address these issues. There was also a mention of a presentation of air salt heat pumps being installed again in this area. There is concern about potential noise and vibration from them if this is the plan. We do object to these amendments and the increase in size and height, but if they are approved, adjoining residents' concerns must be addressed. A lot of residents I've spoken to feel that they are just collateral damage, and actually nobody cares how their lives will be impacted as long as we compile more and more houses or flats into smaller and smaller areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. We have Justin Kenworthy this time for the agent.
Thank you, Chair and members. My name is Justin Kenworthy. I represent the applicant, Network Homes, who is a registered provider that owns and manages over 1,000 affordable homes in Ealing. The Orion Park site has planning permission, as you're aware, for 76 homes and commercial floor space fronting Northfields Avenue and opposite the station, in a very highly sustainable location with good access. A similar but better proposal for this site has been presented to you tonight. It will deliver more benefits to the borough, including 100% affordable housing, more genuinely affordable homes, including an increase in LAR homes from 19 to 30%. And Ealing's housing team will be given nomination rights to these affordable homes. It will deliver more affordable homes, as I've already stated, but some of these will be more family affordable homes as well. We have also reduced the number of studio homes from the scheme in its entirety, so there'll be 0 studios. It will deliver a more sustainable development that uses less energy, produces less CO2 and consumes less water. It will be a more attractive development with more green roofs, electric vehicle charging facilities, and it will deliver also additional Section 106 contributions to the tune of £148,000, which will be added to the £457,000 already secured. And these will help improve local education, healthcare, transport infrastructure, and air quality monitoring, as well as carbon offsetting. The scheme will deliver more benefits to the future occupiers of the site as well, through better quality homes, more dual aspect and triple aspect homes, improving the quality of the landscape, play space provision, and providing opportunities to grow your own vegetables. It will provide more cycle parking, as you've heard, and it has been designed in consultation with the Metropolitan Police Secure by Design officer, and therefore has support from the Met Police. The scheme will also deliver more benefits to neighbouring properties, including, for example, no balconies or accessible roof terraces facing towards Belsize Avenue.
30 seconds.
Thank you. Moving the rooftop amenity space further away from Belsize Avenue and Derwent Yard and adding privacy screening in place. It will deliver more daylight and a better outlook for the rear gardens of Jefferson Close and Mayo Court. So we sincerely hope that the Planning Committee will agree that this amended scheme provides an opportunity to deliver a much better quality scheme for this highly accessible site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you both for finishing within the 3 minutes. Councillor Milliken, can you follow that lead? And you have up to 5 minutes to speak. You do not need to use it all.
Thank you very much.
Repeat yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll try and keep this under the 5 minutes. I'll try and beat James Murray's record. So let me first thank Carol Atkinson for her thoughtful contribution on behalf of local residents. So I strongly object to this application before us this evening. I speak on behalf of the 160 local people that Sean referenced earlier who have objected. We keep being told that this is a listening council, so I hope that the council will listen and reject this application. As we know, the development was approved for 76 units by the previous developer, and as is the way of things, the developer sells on that approval to another developer who tries to cram in more dwellings and increase the height. By any common sense, this is not a minor development. Cramming in 19 more flats and adding 2 stories is not a minor amendment. Now, the decision on whether this is a minor amendment is at officers' discretion. So on page 245 of the report, it says, I quote, "It is therefore the responsibility of LBE to determine the definition of minor material and the materiality, blah, blah, blah. The LBE agree," and then it goes on, "LBE agree that the amendment proposed are minor in materiality," and so on. Now, this is a subjective assessment, and I assert that this is not the case. Despite what officers say, the man or woman on the proverbial Clapham omnibus would not think that this change is minor and so should not be treated as minor. And indeed, Sean made reference to this in his opening comments. Now, I'm very concerned about the impact on Mayo Court. Block D on page 241, Block D will be more than 7 meters taller and an extra 2 stories, and is considerably closer to Mayo Court than the approved scheme. Now, it has been moved from the approved scheme, or the proposals approved, frankly, should be moved more so it is less intrusive to Mayo Court. This is a retirement scheme for senior citizens, and I speak no lie when I say that I've had residents in tears concerned about the impact on their lives. The report says, page 274, I quote, "Regarding the proposed development, it is acknowledged that the outlook from the first floor windows would unavoidably change. However, the proposed building and their separation distance are consistent with the surrounding urban grain." I have to say, it's a new expression to me. "Therefore, while the outlook from the first floor windows would now be part proposal, this is not considered unreasonable and will be acceptable." And I can tell you that the residents of Mayo Court do not think it is acceptable. Now, the appearance of Northfield Avenue is not in keeping with the neighbouring buildings. By common consent, most of the people who have responded to the consultation say that 2 extra stories on Block A mean that the scheme will be far too dominant on Northfield Avenue. You just look at the graphic on page 259 of 412. So you might want to have a look at that. It is horrendous. It is absolutely horrendous. You can see, it's clear, you can see looking at the consented scheme and the proposed scheme, it's much taller. Now, I'm also, as Carol mentioned, very disappointed that the appearance of Block A from Northfield Avenue makes no regard to the Art Deco Northfield station. It's a classic station. In fact, the neighbouring station at Boston Manor, which is the same design by Charles Holden, was on the postage stamp, the 150th anniversary of TfL on the postage stamp. The station was opened in 1932, and there is no nod whatsoever to Art Deco, whereas the Derwent Road flats across the road, built relatively recently, do make a nod towards the Art Deco of design. Now, the amended proposal is not minor to the residents of Belsize Avenue, and the report, page 268, does acknowledge that it will impact their lives, despite what we've heard this evening. Page 268, regarding the proposed development, it is acknowledged that the outlook from the first floor windows from 1 to 147, that's the entire length of the road, would, and I quote, unavoidably change. There will be a material impact on the residents. So the quote goes on. However, the proposed gain and the separation distance are consistent with the surrounding urban grain, that expression again. Therefore, while the outlook from the first floor windows would now be part of the proposal, this is not considered unreasonable and will be acceptable. So I absolutely believe, I take it my time is up, I absolutely agree.
It's more than up.
Thank you very much. So
You've got
I hope the committee
one sentence left.
will reject this application this evening. Thank you, Chair.
The only one to overrun tonight.
Oh, only just by one sentence.
You would have carried on, but... Sorry, right, okay. Does the officer want to come back to any of the points that have been raised in the objectors and or the agents?
Yes, so it is noted that in the original extant permission for both Belsize Avenue and Mayo Court, it acknowledged that approval of that original scheme would avoidably change the outlook, and that this scheme is comparable in change. So we are not denying that the outlook would avoidable change, but it would be comparable to the extant permission approved by committee a couple of years ago. In terms of the impact, in terms of the character to the local area on Northfield Avenue, in terms of the tall building, it is noted that the Councillor Milliken's example of Boston Manor, that opposite Boston Manor is a mid-20th century office block of about 4 or 5 stories of not great architectural merit. Opposite this one is a 6 stories or 8 when you consider the 2 setback floors, which is comparable to the previous consent, which offers a unique offering for this area and a focal point from the bridge, as well as being a placemaker for the Northfields area. In terms of the outlook from Mayo Court windows, we have acknowledged it will unavoidably change, but it is acknowledged that they serve kitchens, as noted on the presentation earlier, and they do not serve the living dining area or the bedrooms of the Mayo Court. Therefore, they are secondary windows. The outlook from the primary windows will not change, and because the building is perpendicular to this building, the windows will pass the BRE, and therefore the impact is considered acceptable. In terms of antisocial behaviour, the block D being a bookend to Northcroft Avenue is considered to help reduce antisocial behaviour by having natural surveillance, whereas the blocks A, B and C follow the same linear approach as the previous extant permission, and therefore it is considered to be comparable in terms of its natural monitoring and its impact to antisocial behaviour. And it is acknowledged by the councillor, it's up to Ealing's discretion what a minor material amendment is. And I've clearly outlined in the report why this is minor material, why it's in accordance to the extant permission, and what the scheme brings as benefits to the scheme. I hope that answers everything.
Thank you, Sean. Do I have any questions? Councillor Brett.
Sorry. Just picking up on the point that Carol Atkinson made around the security side of things, have gated or extra security.
Sorry, you might need to bring your mic closer. Sorry, I'm not sure if everyone can hear at the back.
Can you hear? Shall I shout? Just picking up on the point that Carol Atkinson made around the security and having some kind of gated system. Has that been looked into at all?
Hold that, Sean. I'm going to go through all the questions. So, Councillor Conti, next.
Thank you. I think obviously the overlooking on Belsize in terms of the balconies and the roof terrace that's been moved back so it's no longer facing that direction, I'm sure will be welcome. But I'm just interested in terms of so does that now mean that they're all facing the railway line? And I was just wondering in terms of noise for the residents who are actually potentially living in those new blocks, if you're now facing a railway line and the busy line runs until what, probably 1 o'clock in the evening at night and all night at weekends if the night tube busy line eventually reopens. I was wondering what in terms of noise, etc., what considerations have been made for that?
Councillor Anand.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the consultation, I see on page 254 of 412 that you have asked consultation for MP for Ealing and Acton and Ealing North. Have you actually had a consultation with the actual MP, Mr. Vrinder Sharma? Because it doesn't, I can't see it anywhere in the report. Secondly, I was also looking, maybe you can help me and indicate how many fully accessible wheelchair units we're actually getting, and has that been sort of adjusted after the minor amendment? Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? No, right. Sean, could you address those questions, please?
Yeah, so in terms of the gated community, we don't really want a gated community. We feel they're quite inclusive and also exclusive of the community. Whereas this provides community benefits in terms of open space and access to the retail units and allows anyone to come in and out. That encourages more surveillance and provides much more community benefit in terms of mixing of locals and new development users. And that's why we didn't consider a gated community. Also, we've got to consider the access arrangements, that if we had a gate over to Northfield Avenue, then it could mean traffic building up down Northfield Avenue trying to turn into the site, which could cause its own problems. And therefore, that's why it wasn't considered reasonable for this application to be gated. In terms of privacy concerns, so there is privacy screens along the elevation that faces Belsize Avenue, which will reduce the overlooking into those properties, as well as being set further back into the site. In terms of noise, there's the normal conditions that go with, in terms of they need noise monitoring, and they'll be subject to review from our pollution technical teams, and they're all prior to commencement or prior to occupation to ensure that future occupiers do have adequate and sufficient amenity space in terms of noise and disturbance to not harm their amenity, as well as the amenity of other properties such as like Mayo Court and Jefferson Close. There's the relevant noise conditions attached to this condition, to the report, in order to be sufficient. In terms of the consultation on our system, it says the Ealing Council MPs. I apologise if I've missed off the name there, but on the uniform system, it says the Ealing MPs. So I can only assume then that that MP got consulted. And in terms of the wheelchair, it does say in the documents that it is 100% wheelchair accessible. Reasonably, we could only put conditions of 10% as a minimum. These are all minimum conditions. However, documents provided do state 100%.
Yeah, come on, Alex is coming in.
I was just going to come in just on Louise Brandt's question about gating. I think obviously the speaker, Carol Atkinson, was also raising some concerns about some of the spaces towards the back of the site. Obviously the recommendation before you includes a condition which refers to the hard and landscaping and boundary treatment. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to perhaps consider an amendment to make it very clear that that should also include internal boundary treatment. So for example, the space towards the back of the site behind block D, it wouldn't be unreasonable to have some sort of security gating to get into that space. And I think that could potentially alleviate some concerns about any antisocial behaviour. And I think that could be easily resolved as part of that condition.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't so much that I was talking about a gated community more around addressing some of the issues around security in general on the site raised by Carol Atkinson. Thank you.
Okay, I see no more indications in terms of questions. Does anyone wish to debate? If so, please indicate. Councillor Conti, you're on fire tonight, right?
Sorry, I thought I should. Well, anyway, in terms of this application, I think obviously clearly there are some elements like 100% affordable housing which are great, and I know that some effort's been made in terms of trying to reduce impact. However, when this application first came to the committee a number of years ago, I was actually a Northwood Ward councillor at the time, and I remember the strength of feeling about this particular application. I remember coming to the council meeting when it was considered. I think clearly that the fact that there's been an additional 160 objections locally still shows the strength of feeling. And I know at the time, there was a lot of objection, but people could almost accept or swallow in the end that what was given approval. I think this is really pushing it, adding an additional 2 stories to a couple of the blocks, increasing the massing and the effect really on, particularly on the residents of Mayor Court. Obviously Belsize Avenue and Jefferson Close are affected too. I think it's just this creep of getting planning permission and then coming back, to add a few more stories, this sort of step-by-step approach of getting things taller. I just think this sits uncomfortably with me, and I think I will be voting against this tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Busuttil.
Thank you, Chair. We've been at this application now quite a few times, and it keeps coming back to committee. I have to say, is 4 years ago, when this last come to committee, I voted for this application, and I've got no reason why I would vote it down again. For the amendments to go from 31% affordable to 100% affordable is, I think, quite astonishing. The only disappointment on that fact is I think it's too weighted towards shared ownership, not weighted enough more. I would like it more 50-50, London affordable rent and shared ownership in that respect. I know Councillor Conti has mentioned about noise before with the Piccadilly line trains. And when the night tube does start up again on the Piccadilly line, personally, I've got no issues with that, because if there's decent double glazing there, I live next to a railway line, and I don't hear the trains going past my place at all, even if you have the windows open during the summer. So that issue for me is quite null and void. So as I said before, I've no reason really to go back on the decision I made 4 years ago, and I'm likely to vote for it. But I will say this, to end on this: this application has come to this committee enough times now. I think they just need to get on and build it. Thank you, Chair.
I see no more indications. I'm broadly in agreement with Councillor Busuttil. I was on the committee before. I think Councillor Milliken mentioned residents being upset at that point in time as well. I think you mentioned a resident crying at that point in time. And of course, as a ward councillor, you would have allayed any fears there. So I think this scheme is actually better than the original scheme that we put in, even without the 100% affordable. And that is very good. I echo what you say about shared ownership and London affordable, but I think we wouldn't have got 100% if we'd actually stuck out for that. So I think, and the residents of Mayo Court, yes, we have moved it slightly closer, but it is a flank wall. They are non-habitable rooms, so I don't think the impact there. And we've moved it to be in line with the road quite significantly. So I think that's, in a lot of respects, that's an improvement there. So overall, I think my view is that this is an improvement, and I will be minded to vote for it. So on the back of that, I will go to the vote. Okay, no one's indicating to come in. So right, so all in favour of this scheme, please show. Right, 10. Okay, and all those against, please show. That's very tentative. Put your hand up. Right. Any abstentions? There shouldn't be. Right, thank you. Can I move on now rapidly? So the White Hart. Who is presenting? John is online, isn't he? Is he? Or is he here?
Yes, I'm here.
John, if we can be brief in the introduction, that would be appreciated at this late hour.
Right, okay. I'm just trying to share the screen.
We can hear you. We did hear you, John.
Yeah, I'm having trouble getting the video turned back on. I don't know why. Sorry, I'm
on now. We can see the slides.
okay, good.
We hear your exasperation.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the slideshow to start, but I don't know why it's not starting.
John, if it doesn't start, just talk through it. We've all got the reports in front of us, or we've had the reports in front of us. We've all read the reports. So,
okay. Right. Okay. This site lies just north the White Hart roundabout in Northolt, and on the southern edge of a shopping parade in Church Road. It contains the two-storey White Hart public house, a grade 2 listed building in disrepair, which has been vacant for many years and subject to dumping and squatting. It's a small site with access from Eugene Villas down here in the southwest.
Just keep going. Don't worry about the
Yeah,
slides.
sure. Sorry. The application is to redevelop part of the site to provide a Part 4, Part 5, Part 7 and Part 8 story hotel with 103 bedrooms with a function space and flexible commercial unit at ground level. The existing pub building here would be retained and restored, and the current scheme is a result of pre-application discussion with council and GLA planning officers and consultation with local residents. Some of the key features: this is the commercial unit, function spaces up here, new tree planting planned here and here, and the access retained from the southwest. The hotel would not be within a town centre or opportunity area. However, this appears the only viable and realistic use for this site, since alternatives such as residential, commercial and social community infrastructure are not considered feasible here due to environmental impacts from the roundabout, the small site size, nearby dwellings, poor commercial viability of limited car parking, or because the use would not provide the investment needed to restore the pub. The GLA also considers that in strategic terms, the hotel would be an appropriate land use here due to good connections to West London attractions for both business and leisure visitors. A sequential site assessment has also been undertaken, covering 16 sites in Southall, Hanwell and Greenford town centres to show there's no alternative site of suitable size available to viably accommodate the proposed development. Reprovision of a listed pub with a function room accessible to the local community is supported by the NPPF, London Plan and Ealing policies, which aim to retain pubs of heritage, economic, social or cultural value to local communities. So both the hotel and pub uses are therefore acceptable in land use terms. Now, at up to 8 stories, the proposed hotel would be significantly higher than its immediate surroundings and not in an area designated for tall buildings. However, this greater height, we think, meets many of the criteria for the London Plan's policy for high buildings. It would provide greater legibility in an area without any local landmarks and dominated by the White Hart roundabout. By providing a height increase towards the roundabout, the taller building would also provide a bookend to the adjoining commercial shopping parade along Church Road. It's a high quality design, and a good case has been made for a tall building to be acceptable on this site in line with London Plan policy. The proposal would also preserve the main historic elements of the listed pub. It would demolish modern additions which do not have any historic or architectural significance, restoring the building and reinstating missing features. The general internal layout of the pub would remain largely unchanged, and a sensitive extension would provide a community function room. The proposal would bring the pub back into use, so continuing the historic use of the building as a pub, which is part of its historic significance. So these alterations are not considered to harm the building, and in fact would preserve and enhance its historic qualities. The hotel development would also change the currently poor setting of the listed building. I should go back to that one. The taller hotel building would be largely set back from the pub, which would retain its prominence within the site. The proposed brickwork and cladding of the hotel would also allow the white painted pub in front of it to stand out against a relatively neutral background. The pub would also have a much improved public realm area around it. And the benefits of the proposal would outweigh any harm to the listed pub setting from the tall hotel buildings. These benefits include restoring a derelict Grade 2 listed building, securing a long-term viable use for the pub, reprovision of a local pub when many pubs are closing, provision of community space, improvements to the public realm and White Hart roundabout, as well as providing local jobs and spending in the local economy. Despite its height, the proposed development we consider would not have unacceptable impacts on the amenity and living conditions of adjoining residential occupiers, mainly due to the distances between the proposed new hotel buildings and existing dwellings nearby. A daylight sunlight assessment concluded the proposal would not have a significant impact on daylight or overshadow adjoining rear gardens. A new tree planting is also proposed along the northwest boundary of the site to minimize overlooking and to reduce disturbance from the parking and coach turning area. It's worth pointing out no objections have been made from these adjoining dwellings to the west. Various landscaping measures are also proposed. The hotel buildings would have green roofs, and green walls on the west elevation, that's here, and part of the south elevation to soften the appearance of the hotel building from New Dean Avenue and New Dean Villas. New landscaping is also proposed to the public square along Church Road and planters within the square and in front of the pub. The scheme would have high standards in terms of sustainable design and construction, with high energy efficiency measures, LED lighting, building envelope design, photovoltaic arrays on the roof, and air source heat pumps to produce hot water for the hotel. This would achieve a carbon dioxide reduction of over 60% across the site. The site's public transport accessibility is moderate, and 22 car parking spaces as well as a coach and minibus space are being proposed. 4 of these are disabled spaces. Transport Services and TfL think the proposal will be acceptable, subject to addressing potential impacts. And to mitigate any overflow parking and traffic impacts, a range of Section 106 contributions have been agreed for various highway measures, These include improving local bus stops, improvements on Church Road near the White Hart roundabout to help reduce pedestrian accidents and lower traffic speeds, junction improvements and speed reducing measures on nearby residential roads, and a review of controlled parking zones, waiting, loading and parking restrictions near the development. One correction to the report is that I think I said there was no objections. In fact, there was one late objection from a resident, which was mainly concerned with potential traffic impacts on nearby residential roads. But I think these measures should actually address that concern. Other highway improvements would be delivered by the developer under Section 278 agreement. These include traffic management measures, implementation of a travel plan, parking turning restrictions, improved road signage, detailed design for the site access, and upgrading the cycle lane adjacent to the site. Impacts with regard to air quality, noise, and land contamination can all be adequately dealt with by conditions proposed, and there's a Section 106 contribution towards air quality improvements. In addition, and finally, the scheme will provide a number of planning, economic, and community benefits to the area, including restoration of a local pub with community facilities, improvements to the public realm and the roundabout underpass, provision of local jobs, support to local shops from spending by hotel visitors, and some £415,000 in Section 106 contributions towards various transport and other infrastructure improvements in the area. So as such, it's recommended for conditional approval and listed building consent, subject to Section 106 and Section 278 agreements. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thank you for being as brief as possible on that. I have Councillor Mahfouz, who I will remind you, you do not have to speak. You have 5 minutes, but you do not have to use those 5 minutes. Thank you.
I'll use them wisely. Thank you very much, Chair and colleagues. I come here for the first time to the Planning Committee in over 16 years of being a councillor, because actually this is the biggest planning application we have ever received in Northolt West End. And unlike all the other colleagues who have come this evening, I come as a ward councillor to actually in support of the application that is being put forward this evening. If you ask anyone in Northolt what they want, what's missing, almost everyone will tell you that they want more amenities, that they want a decent local restaurant and pub within walking distance, that they want more local jobs, and they want something done about the traffic issues. And finally, that they want a good development at the White Hart pub site. This proposal does all of those things. The applicant has, and all kudos to them, engaged positively and regularly with local residents and councillors to ensure that the proposal that you have before you this evening, which has taken years in the making, has taken on board the views of local residents, the council's planning department, and most recently, and quite painfully, the GLA as well. The application turns this long derelict site into something that local residents can actually appreciate, use, and will improve the heart of our neighbourhood in Northolt West End. The building is sympathetic to neighbouring homes in terms of the design. We've seen with the green aspects that have been factored in. But also, actually, I would disagree with the officer in terms of height as well, because actually what you've got on the opposite side of the road, not visible from the images, is actually a tower block of higher height than the one that we're talking about here on this. And actually what you will probably actually see in that photo particularly is that the site is actually sunken compared to the level ground of the roundabout itself. So it has even a lower impact than the 8 stories suggests. As I say, in addition to that, it adds a long-awaited restaurant and pub for local residents to use. It has that function space for local events to be able to be held by local residents. Long-awaited public realm improvements. As I've already mentioned, the green features on the building and design throughout as well. That additional retail unit and the image that you'll have seen from the side, very much in keeping with and enhancing, hopefully, the shopping parade that sits right behind it. Over £200,000 worth of spending on local transport improvements, up to 70 jobs directly employed, and in the region of 150 in addition to that in terms of supporting the work of the hotel as well. And finally, one of Northolt's historic building frontages restored. Committee, this planning application is long overdue. long awaited by the residents of Northolt West End. And so I come to urge you to support this application tonight so residents of Northolt can finally have the centrepiece building at the heart of the Northolt West End ward. Thank you.
I should add, Councillor Lawrence will support to this application. I'm Councillor Martin's on the committee, the other third member of the ward colleagues, should I say. So I'm sure Councillor Martin will speak on this at some point. Any questions from anyone on the committee? Okay, I'll open it up to the committee. Do you want to speak? Councillor Martin.
So thank you very much. I can only echo what my fellow ward councillors said about the welcomeness of this scheme. We have been talking to the developers for a couple of years now. There's huge benefits to the local area if this goes ahead. It retains and protects the great listed pub, and it is the only pub that we have in the ward, so we'll all be glad to see that back up and running. It improves the connectivity of the site where the hotel and pub are based and the local area, the shopping trade, but also the streets behind. So it's welcome in an area where interconnectivity is quite hard and often fragmented through the busy road network. So the more we can do to sort of improve how people can get about the ward, the better. So it's welcome for all those sort of reasons, and additionally it will create jobs for people locally, hopefully as well. So very much in support of it, and hopefully our colleagues will be too.
So for my penny's worth, I think this is the best thing that's happened in Northolt for many years, and hope it's the catalyst for more improvements within not just Northolt West End, but Northolt full stop and Greenford Broadway, that kind of state of dormitory housing really. I don't see any more indications, so I'm going to go to the votes. Right, all those in favour, please show. All those against? Any abstentions? Right, thank you, that's passed. On International House, so this is Smriti. Okay. Lateness of the hour, Smriti. I'm sorry you're one of the last ones, but could you be as brief as possible in the introduction? Thank you. Sorry, what was that? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
What?
There's one more after me.
I know that. I know. Oh, sorry. Do we have to take two votes on that? All right. Should we take a second vote on the White Hart? So what vote have we taken already?
Well, I assume it was on the main application.
Yes, that's what I assumed. All right. The listed building consent. Okay. Okay. All those in favour of the listed building consent application, please show. This is the White Hart, sorry. Any confusion from me, sorry. Okay. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to International House.
So I will keep it brief. I am aware of time. The site's located, it's the upper floors of Ealing Broadway Shopping Centre, just located off Uxbridge Road on the west side, on the east side, sorry, of High Street. The proposal is for the creation of a 5th floor following the demolition of the existing pitched roof and extensions to the internal courtyards to accommodate additional office accommodation. It also incorporates a new entrance to the High Street frontage and the demolition of the existing atrium to create a new reception area. There will be additional cycle parking delivered following removal of 60 car parking spaces, as well as commuter facilities, including shower rooms and lockers. For public consultation, there were only 2 comments of support received, outlining some of the benefits of the proposal, including new jobs, the vitality of the town centre, and sustainability. There were 2 comments of objection received from amenity groups, although broad support was indicated for the principle of the development. The key area of concern was the loss of the pitched roofs and a reduction in the size of gardens on site. The loss of the pitched roofs does result in less than substantial harm to the conservation area, primarily because the current design reflects the character of this part of the town centre. However, as I'll outline later, that harm is outweighed by the public benefits of the proposal. In terms of neighbouring amenity, there's James House, which is just shown there, which lies to the south of the site in residential use, and just opposite on the west side of High Street are some residential flats on the upper floors of 23 to 40 High Street. There is no detrimental impact upon the amenities of these properties as a result of the development. There would also be no overlooking or loss of privacy due to the location of the roof terrace within a central position in the site. In terms of transport and highways, there is a reduction in the overall parking provision for the site. There's a loss of 60 spaces, which is actually in keeping with the principles of the London plan, seeking to promote lower car usage for office developments in areas of good connectivity. Cycle access is provided through 3 routes, which are shown on this picture. In terms of conclusion, as I've already outlined, there's less than substantial harm to the conservation area, no harm to neighbouring amenity. The development is sustainable, results to a substantial increase in the urban greening factor. And the harm that is identified to the conservation area would be outweighed by the public benefits, which include over 1,500 permanent jobs, as well as Section 106 contributions of over £333,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions from the committee? I'm almost taking that as contentment. Any indications to speak on this? If not, I'll go straight to the vote. Okay, all those in favour of this development, please show. All those against? Any abstentions? Right, that's unanimous, I think. Yeah. Okay. So, thank you. And sorry, it was such a late hour. We've got even later one with, is it Wade? Wait, just, can you hold on a second? Because following that last one, you may not need to present if that's okay. Let's hold. I know you've waited to this point. What I'm going to say is, other committee, you've obviously read the reports. Are there any issues you'd like to raise or question? Or would you like the officer to present to you, or are you content to move on without the presentation? Okay, I'm getting an indication to move on, if that's okay. I know you put work into it, and apologies for that, but the lateness of the hour is where I'm going with this one. So, okay, so are there any questions for the officer on this? Okay, but would you like to say something, Councillor Martin? It's your ward.
It wasn't particularly, but just confirming that it was Northolt Grange you were talking about. We are talking about Northolt Grange, yeah.
Northolt Grange, we are, yes.
So again, this is proposal has been under discussion with ward councillors, and I think we would broadly support this part of it. Now there's another half that probably comes soon, which is housing on the other half of the site, which might take a little bit more discussion, but I do think this element is quite straightforward to be supporting it.
Yeah, that's kind of why I cut the presentation, because it is quite straightforward within the report. It's quite self-explanatory. So, without further ado, I will go to the vote. So all those in favour of this application, please show. Right, I think that's all those against. There isn't any, and there shouldn't be any abstentions. Right, thank you very much. And the next meeting is, where are we? Where's the next meeting? Well, it's November the something. Does it say? Katie, do you know?
It will be on Wednesday, the 17th of November.
Wednesday, the 17th of November. I should say, I should commend all the officers for the reports tonight and for the IT. We have had our issues with IT and it's worked, I think, splendidly tonight. Thank you very much for that. Thank you all, and thank you for the preps you put in beforehand. Thank you. Cheers. Good night.